The life of a tiny tin man is not an easy one. You march and march and march. Maybe you get crushed by a press, maybe gravity smashes you to pieces. But sometimes you make it to the end of your journey, and that's the moment you know your march was worth it. My name is Lile, welcome to Lile's Indie Corner. Let's follow these adorable little toys to their destination in Tin Hearts. Tin Hearts was developed by Rogue Sun and published by Wired Productions. It released on April 20th for the Nintendo Switch and on May 16th for PC, PlayStations 4 and 5, Xbox One and the Meta Quest 2. It's a first-person puzzle game in which you need to guide a line of marching little toys to a specific destination by manipulating the environment around them. All of it framed by a touching story about the life of the Butterworth family. After I had played the game for approximately 30 minutes, there was one word that came into my brain and stayed there until the end. Delightful. Everything about Tin Hearts is delightful. These little tin men were already favorites just from the trailers, but seeing them in the game, watching them march along and realizing just how tiny they truly are, my heart just exploded. How can you not love something so adorable? See their bright smiles? They will happily go above and beyond for you and do it with joy in their hearts. And every time you accidentally get one of them killed, you feel extremely bad and you rush back to change their course so they can keep marching on and be happy. This kind of joy I felt was palpable throughout the entire game. The environments felt so playful and were dotted with little details, all encapsulating the Butterworth family and their current state of emotions. In the beginning, you have Albot's toy-making equipment lying around, all in very bright colors. Then you go into the rest of the house and see the daughter's child bedroom. And later you go into the basement where everything is more gloomy and industrial, but still so full of magic. In general, the feeling I got was fantastical in nature. It's reality adjacent, but in this childlike way, where everything new and unexplored feels like an adventure, and you're just enthralled by the machinations playing out in front of you. These toys aren't just mechanical, they are magical. But I love that warm fuzzy feeling this game's looks evoked in me. I truly felt like a child, going from room to room and discovering new and exciting things every time. The levels go from this tiny part of a table to hallways spanning contraptions that almost feel overwhelming at first glance. But it's also neatly organized that once you settle in a bit and have a look around, you get a sense of what the solution to the puzzle might be. So, while the design could be a bit much at the beginning of a new level, my brain soon settled in for the ride I was about to go on, and it was almost never as complicated as I had thought. There are two things that deserve some critique though. First is the camera. Since it is first person, you can get stuck on some pieces around the environment that you cannot see when you keep the camera at normal level. Also, the way the camera angle completely switches when you pick up a wooden block to place it somewhere can be really disorienting. And sometimes when you trigger a certain event, the camera will go from first person into a little cutscene, which usually goes quite well, but when it pans back to your view, it would sometimes do crazy things where you seem to glitch into objects. I don't know if some of these issues are related to the game also releasing in VR, but it was definitely noticeable that these occurrences were not outliers but the norm. And then when it comes to the animations of the characters, that's definitely not where the game shines. It all feels very stiff. There's almost no facial animations and movement looks like the characters are held up by strings. They did a decent job of hiding some of their shortcomings since the characters are always shown as these ghostly apparitions. They are translucent and have this soft glow around them that can obscure jerky movement and such. But still, this is not a AAA title, and I wonder if it would have suited them to go for a more stylistic approach than this realism adjacent one. But the overall presentation is just so good that I don't want to fault the game too much for this. As I said, I was truly delighted for the whole game, and some janky animations will not change my impression. Like the art direction, the sound design follows this notion of magical experience. Almost none of the sounds feel realistic, but they are not supposed to. It's this fun environment that needs a certain soundscape to work. When one of your tin soldiers bounces off of a drum, you don't want it to sound like an actual drum. You want it to be this boing effect that sounds like a Saturday morning cartoon. And that's exactly what the game does. It always feels like you're in the mind of little Rose, who's imagining all these grand adventures for her toys. And these are the sound effects she thinks would be right. The same goes for the whooshing when the little soldiers go off on their balloons. Again, it's just so delightful. I know I sound like a broken record, but you cannot imagine my glee every time I watched these guys go off in their marching order and followed them along, listening to the whooshes and boings and all the other sounds of their progress. My inner child was so happy with Tin Hearts. And now we come to my personal highlight, the music. There would have been a good chance they went overboard with creating something too childish here. Since it seems to be aimed towards a bit of a younger audience, they could have gone with the cartoonish music and called it a day. But they didn't. When I first started the game and the intro started playing, I teared up. Not because something sad happened, but because of the music.
Albert, listen.
I instantly connected with it. It's this very calm string and piano ensemble with some cymbal mixed in that I simply love. I did not expect Tin Hearts to have this kind of music at all. That the soundtrack would be such an important part of the experience and that it would bolster and boost every scene with the right touch of emotion. It was an instant favorite. I'm very susceptible to emotional music, so they might be cheating a bit, but I don't even care. I just adore it so much. And I also realized that it was the perfect backdrop for the levels. Because when you're stuck on a section and need to think about it a bit, the last thing you want is some jaunty tune in your ear that annoys the heck out of you after the second replay. This one is just so relaxing and soothing that I eased into the mechanics and took my time figuring things out. There are a few exceptions to this rule, though. Some levels do have a different tone because of what's happening in the story, and that's where I really felt pressure and wanted to leave more quickly to get a resolution not only to that certain story point, but also to the musical piece. But man, I cannot overstate how much I adore this soundtrack. I've been listening to it every chance I get when doing chores around the apartment. It's so good. Thank you so much to my amazing editor, the Potato Witch. Tin Hearts is a first-person puzzle game. Most of your time you run around the levels, mostly one room, and try to figure out how to get your Tin Men from point A to point B. Of course, it all starts pretty easy. You just move some triangular wooden blocks to make them change directions, but it quickly becomes much more involved. They will have to float on balloons, bounce off drums, power up machines, and so on and so forth. And you gain more and more powers as you play to get them on the right track. I really enjoyed the gradual increase in difficulty. I don't think it ever went too overboard with making it complicated, but it also never felt completely unchallenging. But I also get that that is a very subjective take. What's easy to some can be brain-breaking for others, and the other way around. Just know that I'm not particularly good at puzzle games. I am, as they say, a dum-dum, and you would not want me along for your escape room fun. So there definitely were times where my brain got completely stuck and I used the hint system to progress. I really like how that works because often it wouldn't just show you a solution, but give you a slight nudge in the right direction. So you would get help, yes, but still feel some sort of accomplishment because it didn't just straight up give you an answer. But overall, I was very happy with the difficulty and how the game managed to make me feel smart. The only thing I had a slight problem with at the end was how big the levels became. It was a lot of running around, sometimes a bit pointlessly, and while I absolutely do want to congratulate the team at Rogue Sun for their creative planning, at some points it felt unnecessarily vast. It took me roughly 14 hours to complete Tin Hearts, but I do have to mention that I took my time and often just watched soldiers march for minutes on end because I thought it was just so cute. and also to get good footage for the review, since first-person games can be a bit difficult to represent because of sudden camera movement. So I 100% appreciate the option to live through it all from the perspective of the tin soldiers do. I think my favorite part about the gameplay was when you got to take control of a tiny toy yourself and solve puzzles in third-person mode to clear the way for your marching friends. At one point this becomes possible, and moving around in a world that's so big compared to you and having to find your way around to certain areas was just so cool. It can be a little confusing, but you can always switch back to first person to get a better view of where you need to go and what you need to do. And gosh, it's so satisfying to climb around and solve puzzles this way. Mind you, these guys aren't always easy to maneuver, at least not with mouse and keyboard. Sometimes the game wouldn't take input, so you just fell instead of jumping, but because you have an instant rewind, it didn't bother me too much. And yes, you do have a rewind if you mess up. You can also fast forward and pause, which makes this such a relaxing puzzler because you can really take your time. If I would have had to do a level in one shot and get it perfect in one try, I would have given up halfway through. But because of these mechanics, it was just a joy where I didn't need to be freaked out about a time limit. As someone whose anxiety is through the roof even on the best of days, I very much appreciate these features. So while placing items can feel a bit imprecise and the camera can be your worst enemy, the overall comfort was very high and I definitely enjoyed playing the game. Delightful! As mentioned, the story of Tin Hearts revolves around the Butterworth family. Albert is the main character. He's a toy maker and we mostly see life through his eyes. Then there's Helen, his wife, who's a musician, and Rose, their daughter, for whom he builds most of the toys he makes. We also have an antagonistic force in the form of the Toy Makers Guild. We never see any of them in person, but learn about them through letters that are scattered throughout the levels.
Dear Mr. Butterworth, if you would grant me the honor to introduce myself, I am Lucian Mantelfell.
And honestly, I don't want to say much more about it because I truly feel like it just takes away from the experience. Just know that it's heartfelt and really got me much more emotional than I thought it would. And before you all at me, most of it happens in the second part of the game. Until then, it's mostly setup that can feel a bit trivial at times, but does definitely have a payoff at the end. And yes, it did make me cry. So this game's got Lile's seal of tears. The narrative structure is pretty good, while the presentation can be a bit up and down. As I mentioned before, animations aren't the best, so any scene that relies on it falls a bit flat. The voice acting is okay, I wasn't blown away by it, but these actors did know when to bring the emotion, and that's what matters to me. And then there are also scenes that are so creatively implemented that I was almost shocked and asked myself why that wasn't the case for every part of the game. But I was definitely immersed in the storytelling, and that's mostly what I ask for in a good narrative game. You do sometimes get straight up cutscenes, but oftentimes you actually stay in first person and watch the apparitions around you interact with each other. I thought that was a really fun way to put you into the middle of the story instead of just making you a passive bystander. So yeah, Tin Hearts made my heart very happy, and I hope it can give you guys a good time as well. If you can overlook some jank with the camera and want to immerse yourself in a world that makes you feel like a kid again, you should definitely go get Tin Hearts. And if you're in the mood for something different, I recently released my first ever video essay in which I talk about what the Artful Escape taught me about myself. See you next time!